Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello listeners, you're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, and we're on Big Little Small Talk. This afternoon I have a young girl called Bronte McVeigh with me, and she's lots of things, but least of all she's a millennial. So I don't know about you, but sometimes people a bit younger than me sometimes almost seem like a foreign body. So Bronte's going to tell us all about the things that she's been doing in the Toowoomba region, but also some of her life experiences and how she's got to be where she is today. So welcome along, Bronte.
Thank you for having me. It's so lovely to be here.
Now, Bronte, you and I met because you were doing a project called The Living Library. Can you tell me and the listeners what The Living Library is about?
Of course, yes. So the Living Library is really a social inclusion concept. I first became aware of it maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I stumbled across a page on Instagram, and from there read up a few articles about this beautiful initiative which started in Denmark called the Human Library Project, which is probably the more well-known iteration of a Living Library project. And really it was all about facilitating these compassionate, curious conversations between peoples from all different walks of life, but particularly those from really marginalised groups of the community, and putting them in a position and creating space rather where people could come and ask them questions, and they could be really blunt questions that we perhaps might all have about those stereotypical ideas we have about people that we all naturally form over our lifetime. And the concept is really that through those conversations, hearing someone's stories and being able to ask questions in a really safe place, that those barriers that really can separate us are broken down, and it really through the simple idea of just having a chat. And it's called a library effectively because it operates very much like a real library, only that instead of checking out books in a living library project, the readers or the borrowers will check out people for 5 or 10 minutes and really, as I said, just ask them a whole array of questions. It's since the development of the Human Library project, there's been lots of different similar kind of projects that have emerged around the world. The most well-known one in Australia has probably been the ABC program You Can't Ask That, which was a fabulous program and really encapsulates exactly what the Human Library Project is about, which is just asking those weird and awkward questions which people, even if that they feel rude asking, but which those questions are so important to ask, so those stereotypes and ideas can be broken down.
Yeah, so where did you run your Living Library project? Is this the first one that you've run?
Yeah, this is I was waiting for years and years and years, hoping that someone would start it in Toowoomba. I thought there must be a million people who've read about this type of initiative before me, and I thought someone will pick this up. Someone amazing will pick this up and run with it and get it started, and I can't wait to go along. And then I thought one day, oh my gosh, I've got some time, I've got the interest. Why don't I take a bit of a leap of faith? I had no experience, no idea what I was doing. So I thought, sometimes it's up to us to implement, the projects that we want to see. So I reached out to the Toowoomba Library, and their team really guided me through the process. They were just amazing. They took it on without question, and they were the ones to suggest that we actually run it as part of this year's Wear It Purple Day, as a first run of it. And that's really how it all started. So it was run outside the Toowoomba City Library as part of the Wear It Purple Market Day stalls. Mm-hmm. So we were set up as part of those festivities, which was amazing.
Okay, so you might just need to tell myself and other listeners what Wear It Purple Day is.
So it's an annual celebration, effectively, of the LGBTIQA plus community, particularly for the youth community. In Toowoomba, it was run by the beautiful people at Youth Connect, and there were stall holders from so many different groups across Toowoomba, including Peabody. We had, as I said, Youth Connect ran it, inclusive counselling. Really, all these people came together to celebrate what it means to be a rainbow young person in our community. And it's about making them feel safe, making them feel celebrated, and making sure that they know they do have a place within our community. And I'm so grateful that we were able to run our first living library as part of that, because that's exactly what it's about. And making sure that young people have the ability to tell their story in a safe environment, I think, is so important in building the communities of tomorrow.
So when the library suggested to you that you were going to do it as part as Wear It Purple Day, did that sort of throw you a bit? Like, did you think, well, I'm a married woman, what do I know about being part of the LGBTIQ community?
Yeah, absolutely. And I almost had that exact feeling of, do I have any right to have any role in this? Do I have any role in this? I certainly have a lot of friends as part of the rainbow community, but having friends and living the experiences are two wildly different perspectives. So I definitely had that moment where I kind of took pause and I thought, do I have any role to play? Do I have any right to be involved in this? And I suppose the resounding answer I came back was yes, because, being a married, white, young female means that I haven't actually experienced so much of the discrimination that these young people feel. So I think everyone has a role to play, and it really wasn't about me at all. It wasn't about the person running it, and these libraries are never about the people who are running it or behind the scenes. It's about the books and the readers. They're the brave ones. They're the ones telling their story. So if I can do any small part in creating space for that, and then stepping back and letting those stories speak for themselves, I felt like I could do that in a compassionate way. And the books, as I said, the books were just amazing, and as were the people who borrowed them. It takes great bravery, I think, to ask people questions and put yourself in that position to challenge your own stereotypes. That's a really big form of bravery. So
I want to talk to you about the books in a second, but what I did read about some of the Living Library projects, particularly, I don't know whether it was the first one, the Danish one that started in 2000, but it said, we want to provide a place where difficult questions are expected, appreciated and answered, which I thought was lovely. So how did you go about selecting your books?
I think we took a very considered approach, I would say, for our first one, knowing that it was a youth event. Our priority was keeping our books safe, protected, and to make sure that those conversations were respectful at all times. So we briefed them. It is really about briefing them and making sure we are selecting. For the first book, we really just reached out to people within our network. And Megan, you'd remember you've put me in touch with some fabulous books as well. So it was really just through word of mouth. We were selecting books for this particular event, being our first event, who were already very vocal about the rainbow experience and who we felt could really speak to it with confidence. We weren't... So we had a beautiful parent from PFLAG who came along to speak about the parent experience of having a young person.
We talk about that. What is PFLAG?
So PFLAG is effectively, I suppose, if I can butcher the concept, and they'll have to forgive me, is all about the parents and friends of children, or kids and the youth who. So they're not directly, they might not directly be members of the rainbow community, but they have that connection, and they are walking their children through it, or walking other children through it, and walking other parents through the experience for the first time. And there's such a beautiful group of parents, of mums and dads, and I think talking to them, it really showed to me the need for them, because some of them were saying that, you know, we're mums and dads, and lots of kids come to us when their mums and dads either don't know that they're in the process of, you know, they haven't come out yet, or they haven't felt safe to share that yet, and they need a mum or dad figure in their life. So it's for the kids, and then it's for other parents who, you know, their child might be talking about transitioning, and they have, you know, that's completely uncharted waters for most people, and what a terrifying experience and responsibility. And you, as a parent, and I'm not, you know, lucky enough to be a parent yet myself, but I imagine you just want to do it right, but without a rule book, how do you do it? So it's this amazing resource for everyone, for this knowledge sharing of, and just the support, you know, support from all levels. And they do incredible work across the board, and we were very grateful to have them in our library.
So you had someone from the P Flag.
Yeah.
Who else did you have?
We also had a local school teacher, and who's also a counsellor rather, who works in a local high school, and I came across her when I was working at one of the schools in Toowoomba. She's you know, proudly out and about. She's got 2 beautiful children. So I felt that she was a really interesting book for many levels, because her herself, you know, has gone through that experience. She's gone through surrogacy as part of a gay couple. Her daughter came along, which was beautiful, and offered her insight as a rainbow child, if that's the right terminology. And she's also a psychologist. So being able to speak to issues of the impact of events like Wear It Purple, the impact of discrimination, the issues that young people face in schools, her expertise and her ability to bring all of that together was invaluable, I think.
So those 2. Did you have any other? You had a third one, didn't you?
We did.
Yeah.
And he was a former school teacher, and now is a incredibly talented graphic artist. And we reached out to him because of his connection to faith, and how his experience with navigating his sexuality, working in a Catholic school, his religious beliefs in general, and how that all works together. So while everyone had, you know, a common rainbow experience, they all really had very different stories and perspectives to share.
I really loved the variety that you had there, Bronte. So they were your books, and then you had some people come along. So did they ask their own questions, or did you help them along a little bit with some questions that you might have thought that could be good questions to ask?
Well, I was very excited to prepare some prepared questions, because I thought, this will put everyone's mind at ease. I'll put them in a little envelope, leave them on the desks, make them all glittery and fabulous and easy to reach for, so there's no those awkward silences. And not one of them got used. Not one of them, which I was so pleased about. Disappointed that no one got to see my rainbow glitter questions. But so pleased that everyone really had a backlog of questions. And even my husband Jake, he came along and was one of the borrowers, and I don't think he went in it thinking he'd have any questions. He had, you know, he didn't think about it beforehand, but when just through the natural flow of conversation and just reading or talking to someone about what they do, what experiences, you know, they want to talk about, it really prompted him to have a think about, look, I've always wanted to ask this, or I've always wondered about this. How do I approach the, you know, how do I navigate that? And some of the questions that I caught up with some of the readers afterwards and asked, you know, if you don't mind sharing, what type of questions were you asking? And it was mainly like, look, we've got someone in the workplace who has changed their pronouns to they, them. I keep messing it up, and I don't know whether to ignore the fact that I've messed up and just continue with the conversation? Do I apologize? Do I speak to them about it and say, look, I'm not doing this intentionally, it's just a memory thing, and I really want to support you and I want you to know that? What would you want to know? You know, what would you want me to do in that situation? And I felt like that was a really beautiful question, because I'm not sure I would go up to someone and ask that, you know, in a work setting. You know, happy Monday morning, here's your coffee. You know, what's the pronoun thing about? You know, I keep getting it wrong. You know, help me through this. Those conversations, there's just not time in the day. Yeah. And there's just not the space to do it. People don't want to offend anyone.
Exactly. I've got a very similar story. My little nephew is gay, and I said to him one time, he and his partner and I were going out to see some comedy that I'd bought him as a Christmas present, and I said, so boys, what will I say? Will I say queer? Will I say gay? Will I say, you know, queen, whatever? And my little nephew turned to me and he said, just say people, Megan. And I thought, yes, duh, that's right. Just say people.
Yes.
And it was so beautiful in its simplicity. And just before we go off the Living Books project, just as an example, I was reading, I don't know whether it was a session, but in this one group of books that someone had, they had someone who had bipolar, someone who had body mod extreme, who was sort of covered in tattoos and facial piercings and all this thing, and someone from the homeless community. And I thought, isn't that just a great diverse group of people? Yeah, that you can. So for you, Bronte, what are you envisaging you will do with this from here? What would you like to do?
I would really grow it to something exactly what you just described. So in addition to doing events like Wear It Purple Day, where you have more of a genre being explored, or, you know, Mental Health Awareness Month, you know, perhaps, you know, having some books specifically to speak to that experience, I would love to build it up to more casual events where it's that, you know, the library's just a few chairs are popped out on a Tuesday once a month in the afternoon or in the morning. There's a few cups of tea ready to go, and we've got exactly what you've just described, that diverse range of stories to tell. I think there's so much diversity, there's so many stories to tell, that I don't think we're ever going to be short of books.
So Bronte, are you so interested in this project? What's your motivating thing? Like, is it because you are interested in people's stories, or do you feel for the marginalised, or what is, or you know, like of organising events, or what?
I think it's a combination of all those things. My dad, I've been asked that question a few times, and I'm probably the chattiest person you'll ever meet. If I meet someone on the street, you'll be stuck with me for 45 minutes. Absolutely. So, and I'm sure there's a few listeners that have probably accidentally got stuck with me at traffic lights and regret it. But my dad really instilled that in me from a really, really young age, that everyone has a story to tell. And it's so important to have that natural curiosity. So we'd just be driving home from school, and he'd see a man on the street, and he'd just make comments being like, I wonder what he's doing, I wonder what story he has to tell. Or there'd be a gecko on the fence. He'd be like, if that gecko could talk, I wonder the stories he'd share. You know, imagine the places he's been. And he's still like that. You know, I went to visit him in Tassie, and it was swans swam past. Oh, imagine if they could talk, Bron. How amazing would that be? I wonder, you know, they could tell us what they see from up there. So it extends to he just has a natural curiosity for people. And I've just always had that as well. I just love listening to people. I love hearing about people's perspectives. I think why I went into law was because it's people, and why I loved family law so much is because it's about people's stories. And, you know, more often they're not nice stories. They're really horrible, traumatic stories. There's some really terrible chapters in people's lives, but I liked being able to hear them, and I think that's really important. I think stereotypes, discrimination, that won't go away until we realise that there's stories to be told, and we've got to listen first.
Beautifully said too. And I'll just remind the listeners that you're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, and we're talking today with Bronte McVeigh, who ran an event recently called the Living Library, and she's explaining her motivations behind wanting to do it and the joy that she got out of it as well. Bronte, you mentioned that you did law. I just want to back up just a tiny bit. When you were in high school, I believe you went overseas and did some study away. Can you tell us about that?
When I was in uni, actually.
Oh, okay,
so it was, I think it was about my fourth or fifth year in uni. I got a scholarship to go over to Boston to do a summer program at Harvard, which was very, I hate saying it because it sounds so I'm full of myself.
Great.
No.
It sounds so great.
It sounds like I got tickets on myself, and I bought up their entire merch shop on my first day there. I was so excited, and that was a really transformative experience for me. You know, I'm a very outgoing person. You know, I'm introverted in terms of where I get my energy from, but as I said, I love people, making friends, and being in new environments is really exciting for me. But the study, I loved the study, and it was, I think, the first time in my study I hadn't worked. So I was really just able to pour myself into it. And at that time I was thinking I would go into intellectual property law, because I loved film and television and the arts. So I thought that's where I would go. And then I had chose a political science course as well. So it was international law. So that was more about human rights treaties, which if I didn't go into IP, I imagined at that point that's where I would end up as well. But it was just the most phenomenal experience to do, and I think it ended up being a bit over 2 months. It was all intensive, so it was classes nearly every day, and I just loved every second, and I'm so grateful I got to do that.
It's such an amazing thing to have on your CV too, my godfather. And coming from a family like McVeigh's, I think having a bit of political science behind you might just not go astray.
I just started dating Jack at that point, so maybe there was a little bit of that. I need to brush up on my political skills as well.
Well, I don't know that you would need to. So you came back and you finished your degree, and then where did you go to from there? What did you start doing there?
So I was, in my final year, I was already working. I'd been working at a firm in Brisbane, initially just as a little mailroom clerk, delivering mail. And then after I came back from Harvard, I was offered a paralegal role. And then from there, a graduate position. So I was really fortunate to stay with that firm, which I absolutely loved. And still, if I was to go back to Brisbane, I'd be on the phone to them straight away. It was a beautiful firm, McCullough Robertson. And so I started in litigation, civil litigation there, and then moved over to the employment team. So, which to me sounded really boring initially, but I loved employment. I loved litigation. I love writing. So the drafting, which, the affidavits and the arguments. I actually am a very conflict-averse person. I crumble under confrontation. I have no skills in that area in a personal capacity, but I loved the behind-the-scenes strategy. And I loved working with people who were really good at what they do, and they were really good people I got to work with, and they really looked after me and gave me a lot of confidence, I think. They threw me in the deep end from the get-go. And it was huge work, huge hours, huge intensity. Don't think I could do it now as an old woman at 30. But it was great. The people were wonderful, and I eventually decided to move back to Toowoomba this is where my now husband had set up shop. I'd always imagined I'd come back home eventually, when we were wanting to start a family and settle down. So I eventually had to kind of pull myself away from McCullough, and at that point I thought, I love so many parts of the law, but I'm exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted, and I am, to my detriment, a person that doesn't do things. I tend to throw myself a little too hard into things and take on too much. That was entirely really my fault, but I needed a break. And I've been suckered back into law multiple times since then. People have kind of come out of the some friends have kind of convinced me to come back, and so I've gone back and forth since then, and with my most recent stint in family law, which I started 2 years ago, after a great friend of mine reached out to me and said, come and work with me, and that was brand spanking new family law.
Tell me about that. I mean, for someone who's conflict averse, that is pretty harsh, and not pretty harsh, very harsh, and very would be a minefield, I would imagine, to navigate. So how did you go with that? Let alone, that is people's lives. It's all people's lives, but these are children and, people trying to get the best deal for themselves, I guess, in any relationship breakdown.
Yeah. It's tough. It's the toughest area of law I've ever worked in, and a lot of people tried to talk me out of going into it because they probably know me very, very well, and if someone frowns at me on the street, I'll kind of mull over that for weeks and think, gosh, I probably should have smiled harder, probably should have pulled them aside for a chat. And there was just something in me that felt, I just need to do this. There's something that's calling me to do this. And I loved the idea that it was ordinary people. Until that point, I'd really been dealing with big business, which has its own, there's a lot of great parts of that. But I really wanted to sit across from someone just like me. And I thought, as hard as it is, and I don't think I've been in it long enough to build up the mental resilience not to take it home and not to be affected by it. And I always thought that's just something, that's the trade-off for me. But I get to also help people through some of the most challenging times, what is probably the most challenging time in their life. And I get to be the one to walk them through that. And if I'm a little bit more stressed, then at least I'm making an impact. And I hope, I hope that my clients, felt like that. They certainly weren't getting a tick and flick lawyer, I suppose, with me. I do really, really care.
You think that they might have been paying you to get away?
Yeah.
It's too much time with the lawyer.
Yeah, gosh, he talks a lot.
I'll just remind the listeners that you're on Big Little Small Talk with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. And today we're talking to Bronte McVeigh, who has run a living library here in the Toowoomba region, but she's telling us about her career as a lawyer at the moment. So, Bronte, you'd been working for quite a while, and are you still working now, or what's happening with your career and your life?
So I decided it was, I use the word I decided fairly loosely, because the decision was really made kind of by outside factors for me, but I had to kind of take a step away from law in July this year, just because my health had deteriorated to a point where I was really just barely surviving, I think. And the people around me, and particularly my beautiful husband, was the one that was like, you need to pull up stumps. And actually people at work, I think, as much as I tried to hide my own kind of health issues.
Tell me about your health issues. What's happening with your health?
So when I first moved back to Toowoomba, I think it was the burnout and that's what the doctors always said that may have triggered it, where my seizures, which I had as a kid as epilepsy, made a really, really sudden and swift return. And I was still working at the time. I'd started working at another firm in Toowoomba, which I loved as well, but started having daily seizures, and then multiple seizures a day. So it went untreated for about 6 months when we were trying to work out maybe it's other causes, what's going on. And then got in with a fabulous GP, had to go down that pathway, had to pull up stumps again with lawyering because they said it's too unsafe, you're having them too frequently and you're going to hurt yourself, So, and again, it wasn't me that I had to be told. I had to really be pulled kicking and screaming at that point, because I thought I could just fight through it and put on a brave face. And it's really been probably not until recently where there's been a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. It's been a very, very intense road, I think, and I do get a bit emotional talking about it, only because this is the first time I've stopped to think about, I think, how hard it's been, and because I think working in family law, so many people have it so much harder. You know, I'm so lucky to have the family and support I have had the education I've had. So I felt like there was that relative, I've got it, I'm in a lot of pain and I'm struggling, but someone's got it worse, Bronte, so.
But Bronte, are you, epilepsy is not coping with stress. Epilepsy is a neurological disease.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm serious.
Yeah,
why would you think that you're sort of almost shirking your work because your epilepsy has made a sudden onset and sort of a momentous return?
Yeah, I think because it was so complex as well. Some tests would come back really clear, epilepsy, others would come back, there's nothing there, but their seizures were incessant. And they, on all my doctor's appointments, it's medically complex, they describe me as, because they haven't really been able to figure out what's wrong. They know it's bad, they know we need to manage it really carefully, but in terms of treatment, there really has been nothing that's worked well until recently, when I've taken that time off, being supported by my work to do that, where I told them I'm going off my epilepsy medication because I have to try new things, it's not working, give me a week and I'll be back. And they said, let's give it a month. I said, oh, okay, well, let's say a month, but if I'm back before then, wink, wink, that'll be great. So, keep my office open, I'll be back soon. And now it's, I went back to them, I said, I was so wrong. I was so bad, it came back with such a vengeance again. And it was a really, really rough few weeks there. But in that time, we've been able to find new doctors with fresh perspectives, new treatment pathways, and I effectively, said to work, like, this is what's going on. I don't know how long this is going to take, but I'm at the point in my life, it's probably, I need to take this seriously, or it's not going to end well. And I look more at the impact of it has on others, the impact it has on my husband is, and he'd never say, but, seeing him stressed was what did it for me. I thought, he just adores me, and you see that, we've been together 10 years and he still walks through the door and you just think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I found someone who's adores me this much. Why on earth?
Hang on to him, I say.
Hang on. So it was just, it was really bad. It takes you to some dark places, I think.
Just the thought that you'll never be able to get a treatment that's going to work.
Yeah, just that hopelessness.
Right.
And by that point, after I'd been dealing with it now for over 5 years of fairly consistently the same intensity of, I'd go to social events, have a seizure in the bathroom, and I'd be too embarrassed to say anything, so I'd kind of just pull myself together and walk out and pretend it was normal, and I would do that all the time, and it was bad.
How long would a seizure last for? Is it all different?
Yeah.
Different time, different types of things. I mean, I'm imagining sort of seizures where you're lying on the floor and someone's, making sure you're not choking on your tongue. I mean, sorry,
No.
This might be a bit of a living library type moment.
No, it is, isn't it? I myself think I don't really have a story to tell, but I guess it would be interesting. It's become so normal to me. But yeah, I'm fully unconscious. I'm breathing, but it's shallow, so I think that can be very stressful for people. Sometimes I get a bit of a warning that it's happening. I might have a few minutes, in which case I would just call Jake and say, can you get here quickly and get me home? Sometimes he would be able to get there quick enough, other times he wouldn't, and he'd find me on the floor at work. or, you know, my beautiful paralegals would, or someone else. So I'd be out for maybe between 3 and 6 minutes usually. Would wake up very confused initially. I find I have a bit more clarity now, but for a few, particularly in the first 2 years, I would have huge lapses in memory. So I felt like I was on 50 first dates, because we had sticky notes around the house just telling me where I was, because I always thought I was back at my parents' home in Brisbane or at Jake's parents' home, and I just couldn't quite locate myself, and that was quite scary to me. So if I was in a new environment and I didn't recognise the carpet where I woke up from, that would be scary. And I always think the seizures are actually the least stressful part for me. It's waking up from them, which is it. And I say traumatic because I guess it did become, and it has become, traumatic for me. The anxiety of being in a public place, all of that, you know, after I think pushing that down for a long time, those fears really surfaced at the beginning of this year, where I thought, I'm so scared. I got married last year, and I was so scared of having one walking down the aisle, because I thought, oh my gosh, how embarrassing, you know, like I can't control it, and sometimes I just don't see them coming, and I can do everything right, you know, I can be having the best day, and so often I was having the best day, and it would come along and ruin it. And it was that lack of control was a really frightening thing, which I would say only really hit me in the past 2 years, where it became really crippling, that fear of the unknown and the impact it has on other people, because of course I don't want to scare anyone with it, and people are so beautiful with it, you know. I've never woken up and no one's ever, you know, I don't know. No, of course they're not going to give you a hard time.
That's right, except what you would be expecting.
No.
Bronte, that is an amazing story. I mean, I'm trying to think of people. I don't think epilepsy is really discussed very much, is it? It's not.
No, and it's such a complex, again, and we're looking at the moment we're moving away from an epilepsy diagnosis, and that in itself has been challenging, because that felt quite clean to me. And now they're looking into, and you know, more neurological issues, you know, really, really severe migraine conditions and headache conditions and syncope and all these words. And I just came from a doctor's appointment where all those words were thrown around, and I thought, I don't know what anything means anymore. And when I first met with the neurologist 5 years ago, I think his opening statement to us was, we know so little about the brain. We know so little about how it works. And I thought, okay. Excellent.
What hope have I got?
Excellent. And really in the beginning it was let's put you on medication and let's get you into a psychologist to come to terms with, this is your life. You know, this is maybe as good as it gets from here on out. And that has been a harder pill to swallow, I think, as I've got older. But again, now that I've given myself the time and we've got fresh perspectives, I think for the first time in a long time I've got a bit of hope again, and it's given me time to focus on things that I love again. You know, I love photography, I love travelling, and I've been able to I've always done it on the side, a bit of photography, but I've started my own little photography business, and that has been so important for my healing, I think, and that creative energy, I think, has given me confidence back again, that I can be this full person.
You better give your photography business a little
Bronte
bit of a
Elizabeth Photography, everyone.
And Bronte Elizabeth Photography. I think, what do you love doing? Do you love, you know, taking pictures of kids or weddings, or none of the above?
A bit of everything. I did film and television in school, and I kept, it was part of my arts degree at uni as well, film and television, and I just loved film and I love photography, so I've always had a camera really close by ever since really high school when I first got to do it, and never really imagined myself doing it professionally or getting paid to do it. And I still think that's wild that people are reaching out and, you know, driving from the Sunshine Coast to see little old me. It's very weird but beautiful. But at the moment I'm loving families. And it's all these beautiful families. Toowoomba's such an amazing place because there's just always a connection, and I love that. I love that it's someone's, you know, friends, and I went to school with them when I was little, or, you know, they know my dad, or they lived on the same street as I did, or they went to the same primary school. I love seeing these beautiful young families or old families, going through their chapters. It feels like a real privilege to be invited into their little family bubble.
But I think from what I know of you, you probably love the ones who you don't know either, and are new here, and new migrants, and lots of other things who don't have that really long Toowoomba connection, that they're all welcome here as well. Yeah. Listen, I'm going to have to move on because I'm going to run out of time, because I wanted to talk to you specifically about being a millennial. So I'm looking up what are the characteristics of millennials, and you've already mentioned one about being free-thinking and creative. So, there's always this whole thing about, millennials versus boomers, blah, blah. But I think it's interesting about people complain or praise millennials because you want meaningful motivation. Like, you don't want to work for necessarily monetary gains, but for your own sense of satisfaction. Do you think that's a broad generalisation, or do you think that is something common to you and your friends?
I suppose I can only speak to my recent experience where I said to someone recently, I think I've been creatively in the closet law, I love it for so many reasons, but it's a really stable, well-paying job that you tell anyone you're a lawyer and they go, ooh, and you feel that sense of, oh, okay, but there was something in me really missing. And now that I'm doing photography, living more creatively, living purely for something I love, and I never got that saying where people are like, I love what I do. I really love it and I do it for free. I was like, would you though? But with photography, I would, and I have done. So I think for me, I suppose I hate generalities because I think it's just so specific. But I love that. I love that you can have all these opportunities to do what you want to do. And I think there's lots of ways to get it, that you can have your 9 to 5. You can still do that. You can have that structure. And who can make a full-time income off their passion? It's not always there. That doesn't mean you can't explore it. So I think with millennials, if I can speak more broadly, I think we're just more open to the idea of the 9 to 5 doesn't have to be it. You can have a side hustle. You can take little photos, on the side. You can travel. You can do all these things to make yourself this complete person. And I really love that. I really llove that.
I think we've got a lot to learn from the millennials, just quietly, being a Gen X myself. But I did read this whole questionnaire that, BuzzFeed did a questions to ask of millennials, mostly because they'd done one about the baby boomers, and so they thought they better be fair. Now, you tell me what you think about this. So, number one, this is a question to ask millennials. It says, "Brah, why do millennials always break out into song when they get upset?" Do you think that's fair enough?
I'm trying to think when the last time I was upset. Well, see, I just had a little tear just then, and I haven't broken out.
Haven't broken out in song. All right. Well, what about this one?
But I would blame High School Musical for that.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, why do millennials put "lol" after every sentence?
Oh, I don't know. And now I think.
Do you do that?
I do it ironically, but now
ironically,
but I started it ironically, but now I just do it.
Well, that was the other thing that I read, that they do the emojis ironically, and I think, is that true?
No, I just
How do you do an ironic emoji?
I don't know. I think I'm too much of a dag to answer these questions. I'm so dorky.
You're not your typical millennial. All right, well, why do millennials send dozens of rapid-fire, single-line text messages in a row?
I do that.
Yes, why?
I think I just have a lot of thoughts, and sometimes my dad, I can only compare it to what my dad sends me, and they're beautiful texts, but they are paragraphs, and he numbers his paragraphs. So he says, 1, saw a beautiful bird today.
Wondered what it was thinking.
2, got some bread for mum. We're having scones for lunch. 3, and I have to respond to him. I have to copy and paste it into another document and then respond to him so I don't miss anything. Where if I send him text, it's like, oh my gosh, Dad, love you. Just thinking of you. And it must be really must be actually really stressful to get that many messages in a row.
Well, my kids do it too.
I don't know what it is.
I have never figured out. And back in the day where you paid per text, I always thought, you're wasting money.
Yeah.
You're on every single text.
We should be better at that then.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
1 cent text maybe undid that for us.
Just tell me, what does your dad do for a living?
He's actually just retired, which is
he
amazing.
an engineer?
No, he's actually, he was managed prisons. So he was in Corrective Services Queensland. So he was one of the assistant directors there for really his entire life. So us growing up, we grew up next to the prison at Westbrook on the prison reserve, the low security prison, because Dad was managing it there. But so he's the most gentle, kind, beautiful person, and you'd meet him and think, how on earth did you survive in prisons? But he did a lot of work, and maybe that's where I get it from as well. He loved working with marginalised groups in prisons, and he won a medal just before he retired. And I've gone blank, but it was a medal. We went down to Brisbane. We had a big ceremony for it at Government House for his work with transgender female prisoners. And he always was really passionate about ending the cycle. He did a lot of work with the Numbamba prison there about putting in a barista program and a hairdressing program, about getting, the ladies there trained up in whatever they wanted to do, so they had options when they left, because, so many of them were victims of domestic violence and abuse. And ending that cycle started with, being given opportunities that so many of us take for granted, and he was very passionate about that work.
I don't think the apple falls far from the tree,
No,
Bronte.
he's
That's right.
he's
well,
an
I
extraordinary
feel
person.
I don't think I can ask you why do millennials love kombucha so much. That's too trivial. Why do millennials hate Gen Z when the boomers remain the biggest threat? Stay focused, comrades.
And which one are Gen Z? Which one's
That's me. I'm Gen Z. I think
not
we
a threat.
finish in
Fabulous.
We don't own all the houses, but I know that. I think that finishes in 64, 65. So
and then it's on.
And they say, why do millennials put their hatred in every song every single time? Why do they hate Gen Z so much?
What a wonderful creative outlet, though. You know, pop it in a song.
And it's
gone.
And
it's gone.
And
it's effectively, old school journaling, but just in pop culture form.
Right. Tell me, do you watch the Royals? Are you a Royal watcher?
I am a little bit. Probably more of as I've got older. I've really enjoyed following it along, and we're going to London at the end of the year, and I have to we'll visit, and I'll probably buy a Daggy flag, and I'm probably not at the point of buying royal wedding memorabilia. But I do love it. I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting institution, and I like tradition.
You like tradition? Who's your favourite royal?
For no sophisticated reason, I love Princess Anne for her style. I think she's so spunky. She's graceful. I just think she's a trailblazer. I think she was the first British royal, I think, to be an Olympian, which I loved. I think she's got so much personality, and she wears speed dealers with a little suit. I just think, go get it, girl.
What does she wear with her suit?
Oh, speed, that might be a millennial.
Right.
They're those, I don't even know, you can buy it service station sunglasses, or, beautiful triathletes, because they're so professional, have to wear those really, streamlined sunglasses. She wears them when she's out and about. I think that's amazing.
All the interviews that I've done, I don't ever think I've had a Princess Anne before. So there you are, breaking new ground as per usual. So Princess Anne, she always seems so sort of stern to me, but not to you. And I'd be worried that those sunnies might get caught up in the cooked up hair.
You think it would, wouldn't it? And really the stern face should terrify me, because that would normally terrify me. But I just think she's interesting. I think she's got so many layers and so many levels of interest, that she does. She was, I think, the president of BAFTA for a while there. And then, into equestrian, I think she won Sportswoman of the Year. I just think, what an interesting person. And again, great style icon. So shout out to Princess Anne if you're listening.
Well, actually, I did, yes. That's right. And she does. She listens all the time.
Every
Princess
day.
Anne, yes. I forgot to ask you, because I know that you love your fashion, and you were a model over at Grand Central for a little while. Were you not?
I think we were both models, Vic. Let's not scoot over that.
So you love your fashion, and would you love to do more of that? Because secretly I would, yes.
I think the modelling was definitely, and I'll use modelling very loosely, that was really my way of getting into photography during COVID. I thought, I need to photograph something. I can't travel. I do have an unhealthy obsession with clothes. I always have since I was a little girl. I'd over-accessorise. My sister's in fashion. You know, it's well and truly kind of ingrained in us, and it was just in a creative outlet for me, I think. And I just love putting together looks. Just love it. I spend all night, hours and hours, planning our travel, and then half of it will be spent on looks.
Well, you know, I don't see that there's anything wrong with that.
No,
myself,
I think we all need advice.
So that's right. And
it's my advice.
Yeah, exactly.
My husband might disagree.
Oh, well, you're earning the money too, girl. So, all right. So one final question, and somehow or other, I think that you might be a dancing girl.
I am a
dancing girl. You do have
girl.
that vibe about you.
A poorly dancing girl, but I bring great enthusiasm.
Do you dance worse than Elaine on Seinfeld?
Probably worse.
Okay.
So what's concerning is I think she dances good, and which might be the problem in itself.
Well, Bronte, what is the song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
I would have to say, and I'm thinking about our wedding, would be Valerie, and I love the Amy Winehouse cover. That, yeah, you'd have to chain me down to keep me off for that one, and probably my husband Jake too. We're both probably as enthusiastic and bad dancers as each other, so I'll lock that in for my final answer.
Well, that's lovely. Bronte, we've run out of time, but thank you for sharing your journey far at 30. Look what you've done so far. It's incredible, and it's just done with such compassion, I think, and meaning and quest for, you know, real meaning in your life. And I can only imagine that the future will be brighter and brighter for you. It's just lovely. And thank you for being so honest and open about your epilepsy, because you know it is the questions that people probably would like to ask and have been too afraid to. So thank you.
Thank you for having me and giving me a safe space to do it.
Thank you. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.